Dear viewers of the RO channel, welcome to another episode of our podcast. Tonight, I have a very good friend and dear colleague from Israel, Mark Zell. Hello, Mark. Mark Zell is the chairman of RO Israel. I think that our two organizations are very, very well placed in the RO leadership and organization. But at this point, we're both in a very difficult situation. Obviously, Israel in a much worse. It's the second day after the bastardly attack by the Iranians on Israel. Give us a little bit of information about the latest, Mark. For me, Israel is a lonely country defending its existence, abandoned by friends, allies, and not so allies at the same point. Your take, Mark?
Yeah, well, let me just bring your viewers, Jonathan, up to date with what's happening now. Some dramatic events are occurring. What they're going to ultimately produce is anybody's guess, but the Prime Minister Netanyahu, about 2 hours ago, I think, invited all the leaders of the opposition to have a special meeting with him at his office, and that is in Israel a very unusual event, and usually it signifies some dramatic development. We would guess, and I don't know, that they're discussing the decision to retaliate against Iran for its attack on April 14th. So we're waiting to hear news about that. And but shortly before that meeting, our defense minister, Yoav Gallant, made a statement saying that Israel must retaliate. This is all despite the pleas and threats by the U.S. administration, the Biden administration, calling for Israel to show restraint. In that, the U.S. was joined by Britain, France, and the European Union. That was, I guess, yesterday and today. That's where we stand at the moment. The public here is quite confused about what's happening. It's the fog of war. Everybody's been kept in the dark about the government's plans, and properly so, I would gather, but it's a little bit disconcerting when you're trying to plan your day's activities, and we have the Passover holiday coming up within less than a week.
First of all, I have a lot of questions for you, since you're in you're where it's happening. First of all, how would you talk about the hit happening on the Sabbath?
Well, actually, did not happen
during the Sabbath.
Yeah, no, actually it wasn't. Sabbath here had ended about 7:50, it's a quarter to 8 in the evening, and the attacks, actual rockets didn't start coming from Iran until shortly before 2 a.m. Sunday morning, the 14th.
Yes, but in my opinion, the fact that they were launched during the Sabbath, we know that it took about 6 or 7 hours for them to arrive, but the fact that they were launched on the Sabbath does mean something to me. But
yeah, I mean that's not surprising. After all the horrible atrocities that were committed on October 7th were also committed not only on the Sabbath but on one of our holiest days of the year called Simchat Torah, the rejoicing of the Torah, which marks the end of our high holiday season. So all of that, and of course the Yom Kippur War was started back in 1973 on the holiest day of the year. This is what the Arabs and the Muslims do. They demand that we respect their holidays like Ramadan that just ended, but they have no compulsion or compunction about violating our holy days. It kind of goes with the territory.
Yes. Big question, because we've been wondering about what happened about this. It is a definite fact now that the Biden administration provided guidance to Iran through Turkey regarding Saturday drones and missile strike. Your take?
Well, I think it's fairly clear. I would agree with you, Jonathan, that the United States had significant advance warning about the attack. They got it from a number of sources, including Turkey, including Qatar and Saudi Arabia, Jordan, even some sources in Iraq may have reported to them. We're not exactly sure to what extent they coordinated with the Iranians, but what they did not do is give us full information about the intelligence that they had gotten. They had just warned us, and they made it public actually, so the entire Israeli public knew about it, which is a problematic thing, that the Iranians were going to attack within 48 hours. And what was happening here all last week is that both our government and the Americans, that something bad is going to happen. The Iranians are going to attack us, and there were all kinds of the attempts to put the Israeli public into a panic mode. There were people, buying up essentials from the grocery stores. The government was advising us about emergency equipment that we needed to have in the house in the event we lost communications capabilities, electricity, and that kind of thing. But I think the public here is fairly thick-skinned. They didn't really panic because we've been through so much in recent months, and certainly over the course of our history. So that's what's happening, and to what extent the United States was really complicit in this, I mean, people here don't want to believe that, but I believe that the Biden administration may well have cautioned the Iranians about taking too an aggressive a role, fearing that it would blow up and erupt into a regional war here. But
Yes.
I guess time will tell.
Yeah, it's an established fact by now because we have all the reports and the data that the Biden administration gave a green light to Iran and just set a few limits on their attack, and that was done through Turkey. But I have to come back to something that I'm very, very, very strong about: the role of the Muslim Brotherhood. Because you mentioned Qatar, Turkey, and Hamas. They're all interlinked. The Muslim Brotherhood, I'm just going to have to do a little bit of historical background for our viewers who may not know its origins. It originated in Egypt. It was a organization which was fostered by the German Nazi Party. And Julius Streicher, the editor of the Nazi magazine Der Sturm, it eventually led to the Mufti of Jerusalem and the Nazi policies. After World War II, it was disbanded momentarily, and in 1956, it was moved to Turkey by Erbakan. And since then, it promotes radical Islam and the Turkish agenda and the Qatari agenda in the Middle East. Now, my big worry is how might this spill over to Egypt, because Israel is not the only country which is suffering from these attacks and the role of the Muslim Brotherhood. Do you have any information? How are the Egyptians seeing these attacks by the Muslim Brotherhood? And I include the drone strikes too.
Yeah, well, I think there's a general approval among the Muslim public. And I'm distinguishing now between the public and governments, okay? Because many of the governments in our region, Arab Muslim governments, actually coordinated with us and providing intelligence and other types of coordination that allowed us to defeat the Iranian attack in a major way. But the publics in these countries is another story. Now, Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood, you mentioned correctly that the Muslim Brotherhood originated there in 1928, but and indeed under Obama, when Obama intentionally or accidentally triggered the Arab Spring in around 2011,
Victoria
the Muslim
Newland,
Brotherhood,
Clinton, the architects of the.
yeah, Obama and Hillary Clinton, what they did was they triggered the Arab Spring, and that led to a number of Arab regimes being toppled, including Hosni Mubarak's regime in Egypt. And he was replaced by Morsi, who was the head of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, what happened within I think it was about a year afterwards, that he was overthrown by al-Sisi, the current Egyptian president, and he was put in jail and he eventually died there. So the Muslim Brotherhood right now, at least in terms of the Egyptian government, is not only out of favor, but they're kind of, I won't say out of existence, but they've been marginalized. A different situation exists in Gaza. There, Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, and you can see what they accomplished on October 7th, and all that has happened after the mass rape and murder and abductions on October 7th.
And may I interject? Paid by Western money.
Yeah.
Paid by partially and U.S. money.
Well, okay. Let
That's
me
where
qualify.
all the aid went.
Well, okay. So here's what we know is that under the Trump administration, that aid was cut off completely. Okay, by the end of the Trump administration, no Palestinian organization, including the Palestinian Authority, including the Hamas in Gaza, including UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Welfare Agency, which deals only with Palestinian refugees, all of them were cut off from U.S. aid. As soon as Joe Biden took office in January of 2021, all of those orders by the Trump administration were overridden and canceled, and the United States resumed paying hundreds of millions of dollars to Palestinian organizations in Ramallah, the Palestinian Authority, to the Hamas indirectly or directly in the Gaza Strip, and to UNRWA, the UN organization, as well as the UN Human Rights Council, which is decidedly anti-Israel. So all of that happened as a result of the Democrat administration and Biden's presidency. We call him O'Biden here in Israel because he's really kind of a front for all of these Obama henchmen and apparatchiks who came back into power when Biden was elected. So
let me interrupt a moment. There are many
please.
Operatives of the Muslim Brotherhood within the White House now. I mean, there are at least 12 serving members of within the top echelons of the Biden and Kamala Harris teams. That's, I mean, if that's not an infiltration.
About the numbers, all right, I'll rely on you for the numbers, but you're right that there are all these people there. The Muslim Brotherhood was welcomed during the Obama administration openly at the White House. And not only are the Muslim Brotherhood embedded within the Biden administration or the Biden administration, but also Iran. Listen to this. I mean, Iran has 2 or 3 highly placed individuals in the Biden administration, both in the White House and the Pentagon, and maybe also in the State Department. They had a guy named Robert Malley, who was fired actually by the Biden administration because his violations of U.S. security laws were so egregious. But the other folks that he brought in under when he was in tenure there remain. And there's concern that they've been leaking information to the Iranians and maybe openly or covertly cooperating with the Iranians, perhaps also with respect to April 14th.
Yeah. Listen, to be quite honest, from my days back in the service, we were so at odds and ends with the State Department, especially the regional Eastern Med offices. We just called them pinkos. I mean, and this is old stuff. The infiltration was 25 years ago.
Oh, it's more than 25, Jonathan. I mean,
I'm
the
talking
State Department was.
I'm talking about actual moles. Okay. I'm not just
I
talking
think
sympathizers.
in there. I think there's sympathizers. The State Department has been openly Arabist and pro-Muslim since before the State of Israel became independent in 1948. So it's no secret there. Now, during the Trump administration, that began to change, particularly when Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State. He was and remains a very good friend of Israel and the Jewish people. And I think also, I don't know, you can tell me how he is with respect to the Greece, but he was somebody we were
now
very,
that
very
you're
close to.
mentioning
And
Mike Pompeo, that was my next question. I don't know, maybe you just guessed it. You remember all the work we did on the 3+1, the military alliance between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel, which would be under the guarantee of the United States. You remember the conference in 2019?
I do. It was an amazing conference that you put on, definitely.
And you remember the project that we had recommended to the Trump administration, which in some terms helped the Abrams Accord. I'm just going to quickly remind it. It was called the Dehumidification Project, and it involved building pipelines for oil and gas from the Arab states to Egypt, and that would decrease the reliance of the Hormuz Strait, which comes to the next question. Okay, will Iran actually go that far and close off the straits? Because the big power of Iran is its control of the straits.
Well, they look at it even further than that. But let's start with the Hormuz Straits for the moment. This week they captured a large freighter that's container ship that at least had some indirect links to Israel. They captured it there in the Hormuz Straits, and they have, of course, interdicted international shipping in the Red Sea and by extension to the Gulf of Eilat, also known as the Gulf of Aqaba, through their proxies in Yemen, the Houthis. So if you ask if they're going to continue to do this, I think the answer is already well known. They've been doing it, and they continue to do it. This today, the Houthis sent another ballistic missile from Yemen into our southern port of Eilat. We fortunately stopped that, and and another one was sent over from the east, whether from Iran or Iraq, today, even after Iran said that they weren't going to be launching any more attacks on us. So I don't believe anything the Iranians say when it comes to these issues. They are openly opposed to and actively stopping free navigation in international waters in our region.
Well, they've been notorious for it. I mean, it's not the first time, and they're pretty predictable. Question is that the whole world is: A, will Israel answer to this unprovoked strike? And the most important is, which is the next target for the Muslim Brotherhood? My prediction until October is Greece.
Well, I hope not, for the sake of. All right, well, I'll let you do that. Let me just answer the Israeli part, and then you can comment on the threat to Greece. As I said, the Prime Minister's meeting now with the opposition. I think it's absolutely essential. There's a wide consensus here in Israel. It's essential that Israel can't retaliate for the unprovoked attack on April 14th. There's an interesting problem which I discussed on Israeli television just this afternoon, Jonathan, Let me just contrast something called preconception with perception. Okay, the American administration, indeed, most of the Western powers, Britain and France and the European Union, they have this. They are captive to this preconception that it's possible to deal with a regime like the Iranians or the Muslim Brotherhood, for that matter, if you raise that. Um, in a way that you would deal with an adversary in our part of the world, or coming from our culture, even the Russians or somebody like that. But the answer to that is that's false. You're dealing with a culture, a religion, an entire worldview that has totally different a totally different perspective, and that brings me to the perspective point about what their interests are and how to go about conducting their relations with adversaries. They are not like the West. They interpret things exactly the opposite. I mean, to give you an example, I mean, notwithstanding the fact that on April 14th, Israel, with some help from its allies, was able to completely deflect and destroy, with just a couple exceptions, the missile attacks, ballistic cruise missiles and drone attack on Israel, and it was praised in all the capitals of the world, including the United States, in the Biden administration, as this great victory. But the Arabs and the Muslims, other Muslims here in the Middle East, looked at it entirely differently. Today, the headlines across the Muslim world in this region were: Israel is now no longer immune to attack. Israel is vulnerable. Israel can be beaten. In other words, it's Israel is weak. And in the Middle East, when a power is somebody is perceived as weak, then the next thing that happens is they're vulnerable. They're deemed to be vulnerable, and after that, it's an open invitation to
Yeah, the
war.
jackals come in.
Or that's right. So when Israel did not immediately respond, in fact, the New York Times was reporting, Jonathan, that Israeli airplanes, jets, were on their way to Iraq when Joe Biden called Prime Minister Netanyahu early Sunday morning. And as a result of that phone call, those planes were called back. Okay, so this gives you, in the minds of the perception of the people here in the Middle East. I mean, Israel and the West are weak, and they are prime targets. Now I'll let you talk about the vulnerability of Greece in this context.
Were they cheering in the West Bank at the time that the
They
missiles were
were
flying over their heads?
They were cheering. There are videos from Gaza. Okay, the so-called poor Gazans. After all that the Israeli army has had to do to eliminate Hamas, they were out chanting and dancing and passing candies out. The Iranian parliament was doing the same thing all over the Muslim world here in the Middle East. That there was in Chicago, Jonathan. Did you see that? Did you see the video of
Yes.
this meeting in Chicago?
Yeah, I
Okay,
know.
on did you see that on April
Yes.
14th? There's
Yeah, at
Americans
the
getting
Teamsters.
together. I don't know who it was, but there was
Yeah.
a meeting of this. There was a Democratic organization, Democrat Party
Yeah, yeah.
organization. They were all there, and during the guys, the
Guy Totem
master of
Farsi.
ceremonies,
Death to America.
what, yeah, well, no, that they say also. But what they said during this meeting, he interrupted his opening remarks to let all the people in Chicago at this meeting know that the Iranians had just opened an attack on Israel, and that their jets and drones, etc., were about to arrive between in 2 and 4 hours from the time of his remarks. And the whole auditorium there broke out in cheers and catcalls and whatever. Okay, the United States of America. Okay, this is what's happening. So I
That's
can't even
what
get my head
happens when
around
you have
this.
excuse me, you have a weak president. A president who
Exactly.
only beckons his handlers, and he's as cheap as a cone of ice cream.
Disaster. We have got to look. I'm not going to try to disparage him on his personal weaknesses and diseases and mental problems. I'll let you do that. But his his decisions and his administration. Robert Gates, who was Obama's and also George Bush the son's Secretary of Defense, said that in 40 years of public service at that time, Joe Biden never got anything right. And this week, our President Trump, at a rally I think it was in Pennsylvania someplace, said that everything that Joe Biden touches turns to, well, I can't use the word that President Trump
S-H-I-T. I'm
used.
going to say it. Don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
okay, you said it. All right, and that's true because it's a total disaster.
The
It's a
problem
total
is that
disaster. This
all that
guy.
S-H-I-T is risking us in a world nuclear war.
It's
Because
that's
Iran,
happening. You know,
with the
he's
funding
destroying
of
the
the
United
United
States.
States government, is almost, if not ready to launch a nuclear bomb. And believe me, if they have it, they'll use it. I think we both
That's our
agree on that.
concern.
If they have it,
We agree
they'll
on that,
use
and
it.
that's why we have to do everything in our power to stop that from happening.
Well, I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure, yeah.
How is our campaign doing in Israel? Are people?
Well, we're in fact tomorrow. It's doing great. We've got, according to the State Department, there are something like 750,000 U.S. citizens here in Israel, and we think about maybe 60% of those or more are eligible to vote. So we've organized the country, broken it up into over 50 precincts from the north to the south, each with its own captain, sometimes in areas with multiple captains. And we are having our formal campaign launch on May 1st in Tel Aviv. We've got a whole campaign, a fundraising campaign that we're organizing now, and aimed at different demographic groups here in Israel. Israel is a very multicultural society, and we want to kind of appeal to everybody in the different groups. They have different messaging and different approach to voter registration and that kind of thing. It's a big challenge, but we're on our way, and we're very excited about it. And we know that the party in the United States is also paying attention, as they are to Greece, as
Yes,
I
there have been
understand.
changes, and Republicans overseas are working very hard. We're one of the biggest. You're one of the biggest abroad. We're close second, 158,000 American citizens. We've managed
Wow.
got about 35, 40,000 to become our members and register. That's within 2020. As we're coming to the end, last message for the people of Greece.
Well, listen, first of all, we look at the people of Greece as longtime friends. I mean, when I say longtime friends, I'm talking about well over 2,000 years. Sometimes we haven't been so friendly, but most of the time we've been very close. We've influenced each other, and together we have not only changed, but we've created Western civilization, the Judeo-Christian values that we want
Exactly.
to protect against the Islamists and the jihadists and these other forces that are trying to destroy the world that we know. And as Republicans, this is one of our most important challenges, both in your country and in ours here in Israel. So thank you for all the great work that you're doing, Jonathan. It's amazing with your television station, your outreach, and you get out the vote efforts all over Greece. And I might just say to all of you in Greece, thank you. Thank you for your commitment to those values that we as the Jewish people share with you and will work together with you to protect.
Don't forget, we share the good book.
That is
Shalom from
true.
Greece, and a few points from me. Dear viewers, you heard from Mark Zell, very important information from Israel. Now comes a sad, unfortunately, prediction for me for the next month. Israel is just a test. The Muslim Brotherhood has been flexing its arms for months, years. Unfortunately, the instability which comes from the Biden administration's weakness and will end in November creates a free-for-all and situation in regional politics and world politics, which means that everybody has to grab whatever they can until the Trump administration comes in. It's a very dangerous situation, and speaking of the Eastern Mediterranean, which is our focus, as I am also the director of the EastMed Strategic Studies Institute, my prediction is that apart from the fact that there will be an escalation coming from Iran and its proxies, the Muslim Brotherhood will be hitting Greece or Cyprus and in the Balkans until October 1st. So be vigilant. Our brothers in Israel are there. We're going to greet and to say goodbye to Mark Zell. Let's hope we talk soon and have some better news. Shalom again from Greece, and see you on the next RO show.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for all the great work you're doing. Shalom from Israel to everyone in your country.